Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Shoup. I'm going to be your instructor for Music Theory 518, which is post-tonal analytical techniques. So in this video I'm going to go over the syllabus and I'll make sure you understand how to sign up for a presentation, and then I will post everything on Canvas and you can just take it away after that. I just wanted to make sure that at the beginning of the video I was actually on screen so that you can see what I look like and just chat for a minute. We have to have an online version of this class because I have a neurological disability, so it's impossible for me to teach in person this semester, and it's been this way for, unfortunately, a bunch of the pandemic. So I'm sorry that I won't necessarily meet you in person during this spring of 2022. I will have office hours online, and I would love for you to show up on Zoom and just say hi, introduce yourself like I'm doing now. It's not awkward at all, I promise. And also, in the spring, I may have an office hour or two outside. It just depends on the weather. So if you're local to Fort Collins, then we can potentially meet in person. Last semester I had some of them in the trial garden, and that seemed to work well. So we'll just see what the weather holds, basically. But if we have some nice days in April, it might be good to be able to meet outside a little bit. So we'll just see. So this is my 6th year at CSU, and this is the 6th time I've taught this class. And I normally teach this class in the spring. I normally also teach freshmen, and I'm only doing a little bit of that this year because it's better for them to have in-person instruction, even with masks on and such during the pandemic, if possible. And let's see what else. So I did my undergrad in composition, and my performance area is voice, although that might not be super evident from how gravelly I am this morning as I'm making this video. And let's see what else. I minored in German, and my master's degree is in music theory. I continued to study voice and composition while that was happening, and both of those degrees are from Indiana University, so I was there for 6 years doing that, and I'm originally from Indiana. And then I did my PhD in music theory at the University of Western Ontario, that's in London, Ontario, Canada. So then I moved to Ohio and taught at the College of Worcester for 2 years. Then I got my job here, and that's everything. So I would love for you to post on this initial discussion thread and tell me, like, where are you from, and what else have you done? How are you teaching? Maybe you're teaching now, or maybe you took time off between degrees to teach or work or something. I'd love to hear all about it. So please post some things in the discussion thread. I know I asked you also to post like some music that you enjoy. Could be anything, really. And you can see my giant George Crumb score in the back. I'm a George Crumb scholar, at least for right now. I'm finishing a book about American collective memory and the music of George Crumb, and specifically his music that has to do with war. So Black Angels is one of the pieces that I study, and that's the giant score for it back there behind me on this thing that is a pump organ that belonged to my great-grandparents. Anyway, lots of fun random facts. Feel free to drop your own fun random facts in the discussion. And in the rest of this video, I'm going to just do a screen cast so you can look at the syllabus with me and look at the sign up for presentations. So I hope to hear from you all soon. So let's take a look at the syllabus together. This is the syllabus that I have posted in the files section of Canvas, and I link to it in the announcement. So here's the first page. It's got my information at the top. It has my email address, notes that the class meetings are going to be asynchronous, and that I'll have office hours on Zoom on Tuesdays and by appointment. This is part of our original, what would be our class meeting time for the in-person section of the class, and so that's partly why I scheduled my office hours then. But I really mean this part where I say by appointment. I'd be happy to meet with you outside of that time and find a time when it's convenient for us to talk especially if you are not in Fort Collins and you are in a different time zone. We're going to talk about analytical techniques for 20th century music in this class. We've got the course objectives here. And I've noted that we're going to read most of this book, the Judith Lockhead Reconceiving Structure in Contemporary Music, but you don't need to purchase it because you can download it a chapter at a time for free from our library, and I will also post PDFs of each chapter as they're assigned, so no need to purchase anything. I'll pretty much post everything is already on Canvas. I've got links to the online articles and links to PDFs for the things that you need to read offline. Here is our grade breakdown. As you can see, we have a lot of weekly discussion posts. We have an article presentation where you will sign up to present one of the readings that we're doing this semester, and I'll get to the sign up information shortly. And then you will also write a position paper, which is an argumentative one-page single-spaced paper, and the details of that are in the same syllabus here. And then a conference abstract, a 250-word persuasive abstract like you might send to a conference. You'll do a final presentation and a final paper, and ideally your position paper, abstract, final presentation, and final paper will all be on the same topic. You are certainly allowed to change topics, but the idea is that you could stay with this one focus for your research for the whole semester. And then I have a little statement about how I expect you to participate in everything that we're doing in the class. If you have to miss something, if you need an excuse for an assignment or something, just, communicate with me. The best thing to do is just email me, and we can always work something out. So here are some more details about the discussion posts. Those will all be on Canvas. You can expect 1 to 2 per week. And they're all about 250 words. I'm not grading you on writing for those, so feel free to just use bullet points, post an example. It can be very informal writing. And then your article presentation, which for you will be a video of about 10 minutes about the article that we're reading in a given week, and a handout to go with it. The handout will have things like the thesis, a little background about the author, and some discussion questions, and then maybe some other things, like a brief outline of the article or other information that you feel like is really worth bringing out in your presentation. So the idea is then at the end of the semester, you'll have a sort of collection of handouts and access to a bunch of videos still that you can use for things like preparing for your comps, for example. You'll have this collection of useful materials about analysis from a bunch of different perspectives. So I will send you a Google document where you can sign up for your presentations, and that information will be available as soon as this video is. Then you'll write a position paper. It's a 1-page paper, and the idea is that you have some kind of argument, and it doesn't have to be an earth-shattering argument, but you have some kind of argument. You can respond to one of the readings that we've done by that point in the semester, or you can think about what your prospective project will be. I know that it's hard by this point, by the midterm kind of the semester, to have a really strong argument for your project, and it's okay for that argument to change over the course of the semester, but the idea is for you to practice writing in a persuasive, argumentative way. So a lot of times the problem with people's position papers is that there's no discernible argument. And we will talk about that as the semester goes, and I'd be happy to work with you on it. Before you turn it in, I can read a draft of it, or I can meet with you and we can talk about the topic, and you can kind of have a chance to work through it verbally before, early before you have to write it down, things like that. And it gives you the format that this needs to be single-spaced with 1-inch margins and a 12-point font, etc. If you have any examples, you'll put them at the end, and I really do insist that you format the paper this way. Then, a little bit later in the semester, you will write a conference abstract. This is a skill that I think is good no matter what you're going into. Writing in general is a good skill no matter what your professional plans are. But a conference abstract especially, I think, is really useful for you to know how to write. It's almost like an elevator pitch of your project. what are the most interesting things about your project that you could put into an abstract? What are the most compelling things that you would want someone to know? I have a video about how to do this. I have a handout. I, once again, would be happy to work through it with you one-on-one as you begin working on it. And, we can definitely workshop it. It doesn't have to be something you do completely on your own. So there's some information about that. You'll do a final presentation, and that's due during the second to last week of classes. This will be a 7 to 10 minute video presentation, similar to your article video presentation. You can use a handout or slides or whatever works for you. You can play clips of music, things like that. But you'll have to make that available so that I can post it on Canvas. And then during the last week of class, you'll be able to comment on each other's video presentations. And I hope that you will. I don't think I made that discussion required, but I do think it's really valuable to get feedback from your colleagues and for you to give them feedback. So then you'll write a final paper. It's fine with me if you want to use some kind of alternative format. Last year, I had a student make a podcast interview that had a really wonderful handout to go with it. That would be fine. Or if you want to do something where you perform part of a piece or somehow include some other thing besides just you talking over a PowerPoint, that is fine. Just please talk to me about it in advance so that I know what I'm evaluating. And then the majority of you, I think, will do the paper version of it, and that includes a double-spaced paper of 10 to 15 pages. So similar format to the position paper, but this one must be double-spaced. So it's a little bit, it's hopefully not too daunting to write 10 to 15 double-spaced pages. If you're not already familiar with the Chicago Manual of Style, I recommend getting familiar with it. You can look at it for free, completely use the entire resource for free via our library system. So if you go to our library webpage and put in Chicago Manual of Style, it'll give you access to the online version. Once again, any score examples that you want to include will be at the end of the paper. And that's going to be due via Canvas as a Word document by the Wednesday night of finals week so that I have a little time to read them and enter grades and things like that. So part of my idea is that you will get a lot of feedback on the position paper. Like I will mark up a lot of comments for you and a lot of things for you to improve. And similar deal with your abstract, you'll have a lot of things you can, try to improve based on your abstract. And then you'll have, presentation, you can get some feedback from me and from your classmates. And then for the final paper, I probably won't give you quite as much feedback because by then, hopefully the idea is I know what your paper is about and you've already gotten a lot of feedback about it, and that's kind of like your final statement, and I'll just give you a grade. And if you have any questions about the assignments for the course or anything that is an assessed, graded component of the course, definitely reach out. I'm happy to talk more about it, explain things, give you a sense of what to expect, stuff like that. Then I have some miscellaneous information here. It's very common for students in this class to want to ask me for a letter of recommendation, which I'm almost always very happy to write. And I want to, do things to support you. I want to help you with your job search or your applications for another graduate degree or whatever it is. But please do be the kind of student who it's easy to write for, because I have occasionally had to say, I don't think I can write you a strong letter of recommendation. But most of the time, the vast majority of the time, I'm very happy to do that. But this gives you some ideas of things that you would want to do if you want me to write you a strong letter. Contact policy is just that you should plan on allowing 24 hours for a response from me if you email me. I pretty much check my email during business hours, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, Mountain Standard Time. If I get an email outside of that time, I will definitely respond to it, but it might take me a little longer than 24 hours. And if you just ask a question about the grade breakdown or something else in the syllabus, note that I won't necessarily respond. I'll just wait for you to look at the syllabus yourself. But I'd be happy to interact with you via email Of course, if you have an emergency or something and you're like, oh no, she won't see this in time, just send the email anyway, and I will respond to it and deal with it when I'm able to. But when in doubt, send me an email and we'll work things out. Here I just put a link, or not a link, I just gave you the information for the Instagram handle I have for music theory. It's separate from my personal one, but it's where in the past I have posted a lot of content aimed at the lower level music theory classes, and this semester I'm planning on using it for this class a bit. It's really more of like a review kind of a space and less of a, I'm not like introducing new material on Instagram that you're going to be like held responsible for, but I think it could be a fun place for us to interact and for you to get access to some kinds of like reviewed content. For example, for this class, I'm thinking like I might post something there about like definitions of some terms or something. Things that would be covered in our normal class content, but also that will be helpful for you to just have like, oh right, that's what this word means, or that this is who this person is, or something like that. There's a lot of terminology and a lot of like people who will be new to you this semester, and it can be helpful to have just an informal place to think about those things. So I will certainly not keep track of who's following me there and who's not. I don't follow students back while they're still my students. So feel free, no pressure. I made it last semester and it's been fun for me. I also post a lot of jokes that I find about like funny tweets having to do with classical music and such, but it's just fun and silly. Here's a statement about academic integrity. I do expect that all the work you're going to do this semester will be your own work, and that you're not going to use the same assignment for 2 different courses. You're not going to copy something from the internet or from a fellow student, etc. Probably nothing new to you there, or just a reminder. Here are some COVID statements that all the faculty across the university were asked to include in our syllabi. Of course, this is really important, but it also is slightly less relevant for this class because we're not going to meet in person. So I have a land acknowledgement because it's important to me for us to remember that CSU is on the traditional and ancestral home of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute people. And the way that CSU states that is rather diplomatic. It's traditional and ancestral. I would say unceded. There is a lot of actual tribal activity in our region that is really fascinating and great to learn about. The Northern Colorado Powwow Association being part of that. And before the pandemic anyway, they would have kind of like a seasonal powwow schedule, and there would be one on campus in the Laurie Student Center, but there's also one that used to be at the North Atzlan Community Center, and in any case they were really amazing to go watch, and they were open to the public. So anyway, I want to keep this in mind because whiteness is such a feature of North American music theory, and I'm trying to include readings this semester that will draw our attention to that in a critical way, and thinking about how whiteness controls the actual place where a lot of us in the course actually live in Fort Collins, I think is valuable. So that can be a theme that we return to over the course of the semester. Here are some other links for other campus resources if you believe you're going to need a religious accommodation to miss something, or need a late deadline for something because of a religious observance. That's completely acceptable, and there's a request form that I just found out about. Here is information for undocumented students in ways that the campus can support you. I certainly support you, and I want to do what I can to make this a valuable experience for you. So I'm not asking you to disclose your citizenship status, but if there's something I can do to help you as an undocumented student, know that I want to do that. This link is the Women and Gender Advocacy Center has the support for people who are experiencing domestic abuse. And they also have resources for people who have experienced different kinds of traumatic assaults, basically. So if that's something that you think is relevant to you, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to them, because they have an amazing victim assistance team, and they have a lot of resources there. The CSU Health Network is actually located really close to the music building. So if you haven't been over there, you can go over there to go to a walk-in clinic and also to get a vaccine if you haven't had one already, or to get a booster. And they have a lot of resources as well. I think that's a fantastic thing to have so close to our building. If that's something that you think would benefit you, you can find a lot of information, including vaccine info, on their site. And here is some information about the Student Disability Center, and also just the idea that being a music student is hard on your body, and we, the faculty, hope that you will take advantage of the resources on campus to support yourself physically while you are a student here. And also the CSU Disability Center, if you have a learning disability or think that you might, or if you have any other kind of physical impairment, I would recommend contacting them or looking at the resources that they have, because a lot of disabilities are invisible. A lot of them are things that are relatively easy for students to downplay, and I don't want you to do that. I want you to take advantage of the fact that you have a disability center on campus. Other updates. Masks are required inside university buildings. That's probably not news for you at this point. We have a vaccine requirement, and if you don't want the vaccine or can't have the vaccine, then there are exemption requirements. Please use the COVID reporter if you do feel sick or if you get COVID. That has nothing to do with your grades or your status as a student or anything. We just want to make sure that we are aware of COVID cases on campus. Once again, not super pertinent to this class because I know some of you are not in Fort Collins, and others of you, we're not meeting as a class. So nonetheless, I suspect you will have other classes in person, and it's always good to disclose those symptoms and such. So I don't need to know whether or not you've had a vaccine. If you need to miss class because of COVID, if you have to isolate, or if you are quarantined, and by miss class, I mean like if you have some kind of thing that's interfering with your ability to complete the coursework, then, just communicate that to me. You don't have to tell me the details of your health situation. Just say, like, I've got, this situation, or I think I've had a COVID exposure. I need to quarantine, and I'm not going to have as good internet access, or whatever. Feel free to let me know those things, so that I just want to help you succeed in the class. And I know that there's a lot of really stressful things happening right now that might make it difficult. So then we get into our actual course content, course schedule. You can see that I've got everything arranged by week, and I've got the 2 readings posted there. And if there's other due dates, then I've tried to include those as well. And I've got the links to the readings that are online. But if you go to Canvas, you can also see where, like, for each discussion thread, I've linked to the reading again. So hopefully that'll make it easy for you to find the readings when the time comes. This week, I'm doing introductions. We're doing that now. I'll have you sign up for presentation times, and I'll go over that. And then I have one reading for you, which is this article by Philip Ewell that some of you may have read before in bibliography class. It is a written version of a keynote address that he gave at SMT, which is the Society for Music Theory. And he did a wonderful job, but it was somewhat controversial. And so I wanted to give you a chance to read that and once again think about whiteness and race as issues that are manifest in music theory, even though we might want to we may have been taught to ignore such things, or to think that those are not musical issues. Those are, social issues, but they're not part of music theory. But indeed they actually are. And I think his article does a great job of explaining that. His article is focused partly on Heinrich Schenker, who is a early 20th century or kind of mid 20th century music theorist, and did not work on like post-tonal music, but I think a lot of the issues that he raises in the article apply to a lot of different kinds of music theory, not just to tonal theory. So that's why I'm assigning it. And you can go ahead and have a discussion about that, and I'll participate in the discussion as well. So you can find details about that on Canvas. Next week, I've got 2 chapters for us to read from this book called A Blaze of Light in Every Word, Analyzing the Popular Singing Voice by Victoria Malloway. And she's someone who is a few years older than me or ahead of me in her career, but who was a student when she was a grad student when I was an undergrad, and so I've known who she was for a really long time and respected her for a really long time. I think she does amazing work. So I'm really excited to read some of this book. I haven't read it before, but I have a lot of faith in her as a researcher and a writer. So I'm looking forward to it. Also, this class, this year, this version of this class has taken on a little bit more of a pop music emphasis than it has in the past. But I think that thinking about timbre and qualities of singing voices is actually completely relevant to any kind of classical analysis that you would do also. So that's why we're going to start off with that book, and we're only going to read the intro and the first chapter. But good news is you can get the whole thing for free to read online, but you can download every chapter from our library system once again. So if you're really into it, you could think about, some aspect of that book might prompt something for your final project. So if you're really into it, you could read the rest of it for free if you want. In week 3, we've got this article by Emily Adamovich, who was a classmate of mine at one point, also a little bit ahead of me though in her career. And this was a paper that I heard her give about Philomel that she then published. And if you're not familiar with Philomel, I'll make sure that we link to a recording and performance of it in week 3, because it's an amazing piece, and I think it'll be really cool to listen to it and think about it after having read these chapters about singing voices and how to think about singing voices in an analytical way and pitch and so on, because it is a classical piece, Philomel, but it's also unusual. It's for voice and electronics, and it's just a really unique experience. I think it's an amazing piece. So that'll be the beginning of week 3, and then in the second part of week 3 we'll read this. It's actually an excerpt from this article by Eric Drott about triads in a post-tonal context. So this piece, the Philomel article, is a 12-tone analysis. And don't worry if you don't remember a ton of set theory from the review or from undergrad, that's fine. I think you'll be able to grasp what the article is about without that. And I'll make sure it's well explained, either if someone presents it or if I do. But this one, I think, pairs well with it, because in Eric Drott's article, he talks about what happens when you have a triad in an otherwise post-tonal context, and what different theorists have thought about that over the years. And it's just an interesting kind of take on what triads are. So I like that kind of tonal, post-tonal contemplations happening in that article. In week 4, we've got a couple other articles about pop music, or less, oh no, I have a typo, less classical music here. So you'll notice that I'm linking a lot of articles from Music Theory Online, and I love that partially because they get to stuff so quickly that I feel like there's was cutting edge the word I want to use? Not really, but it's just they can address things really that are relevant in a timely manner. So they'll talk about popular music, and it'll actually be something that's still popular and not like the Beatles. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just really like using Music Theory Online for this class. Also, you can read it online, so it's you don't have to hunt anything down or buy anything. And that's also, of the music theory journals, Music Theory Online, which is run by the Society for Music Theory, it's a well-regarded journal, is the most varied, I think, in terms of its content, in terms of the types of music that are analyzed in the journal, things like that. So you'll see it a lot in this class. We've got an article this week in week 4 from Megan Lavengood, and I think that this will also fit well with the things we will have read by this point, because she's really interested in timbre and texture and narrative, as you can see. So she'll get into what timbre analysis has been and how to sort of do it from a more cultural perspective. And she looks at a lot of really fun 1980s music to do that. And then Cora Palfi, we have this analysis of memory and Sufjan Stevens, who I listen to a lot around the holidays. I don't know about you if you're into him at all, but but this class starts in January, so I have just done a lot of listening to Sufjan. I'm really interested in music as a thing that participates in cultural memory or collective memory, and so the idea of memory being a thing in his music was really compelling for me. So I was like, oh, I really want to read that. That'll be good for us to check out. And in week 5, you can see most of the weeks don't have like a stated theme, but I used to do that more, and so I have this one for week 5 of film and video game music, and I've got 2 articles about those things. The major tritone progression in recent Hollywood science fiction films is a really fun article about this thing that I'm sure you've heard, but maybe not put a name to. And Scott Murphy does a great job of theorizing that in a broader context of this like one tritone progression that is heard in all these soundtracks. And then we've got Sean Atkinson, who talks about like topics and tropes about flying, like music that sounds like flying in video games especially, but also in some films. And it's just again a really fun article. So if you're into those kinds of things, you might want to consider signing up for one of those 2 articles. And then in week 6, we get into reading 6, 7, and 8. We're going to mostly be reading from this book that I said is like the book we're going to read a lot of in the class, Judith Lochhead's Reconceiving Structure in Contemporary Music. And it's all about how to analyze music when maybe it's all electronic and there's no score, or, you know, things like a phase piece where there might be part of a score, but the score doesn't necessarily reflect what you're hearing or what it's like to perform it. So I really love her take on these topics. The first about maybe 4 chapters are very philosophical, and then chapter 5 and onward focuses on individual pieces of music and how you actually analyze them. If you want to read more of it beyond chapter 5, you'll certainly be welcome to do that, and you can again use that maybe as a springboard for something you're going to write about for a paper, but that'll be something to contemplate as the semester goes. But I just think her book is really valuable for thinking about what does it actually mean to analyze this music that's like not tonal and maybe not serial either. It's not necessarily something you can do with set theory. What is analysis in that case? So it's a great book. We're going to read the first 5 chapters of it. And then to kind of cap off the last chapter of it, we're also going to read the beginning of Thomas Torino's Music as Social Life, the Politics of Participation, because he gets into a lot of like, why does music matter, but like, why does music sound like something that's important to you? Why do we get these associations with particular pieces or particular kinds of music, etc.? So we'll read the beginning of that, and I think it helps give you a vocabulary for like what else is happening in some of the pieces that we'll study. So there's the Torino. Then we have spring break. Notice that your position paper is due right before spring break. So you'll turn it in and then go on your merry way. When you come back from break, we have this part of a book chapter by Peter Burkholder, who you might recognize because he's one of the authors of the History of Western Music. From Norton. So if you use the NOM in undergrad, he's one of the current author of the NOM. But he has a book chapter here that's separate from that we're going to read part of, a simple model for associative musical meaning. And it really is simple. It's like something that it explains sort of like why anyone might hear music and like take certain meaning from it or have certain associations with it, even if they have no musical training. And I find it really useful to just like make connections, to be able to articulate connections I'm hearing in things. So in that week, I also have posted the abstract workshop video. You don't have to comment on that for a discussion grade, but you'll be able to post questions if you want to. I made a discussion for it. After that, we have another week of just one actual article. This article about timbre in Black Angels specifically. So this may not have been apparent. Maybe I'll mention this earlier in the introduction part of this video, but I studied George Crumb, who is a living American composer. At this point, a very senior and a little bit old American composer. He's 92, and I have always loved his music. I love Black Angels very much. It's a piece that he wrote in 1970 and that's historically been associated with the Vietnam War. You may have come across it. It's I think, still in the NOM. So if you use that book in undergrad, you may have studied the piece. I don't know. But she talks about some of the timbral things going on in that piece. And then I'm actually finishing up a book where I analyze that piece in a lot of detail. So I'm going to make a video where I just introduce you to it one movement at a time, and then I'll ask you to listen to it. And I'll tell you some things that I have learned in researching it and analyzing it. In week 11, your conference abstract is due the end of that week. So by that point, you should have had a good chance to get going on it, ask me questions about it, have me read a draft of it, and then I can give it a final grade after Friday, April 8th. That week we're going to focus on Crumb for a few weeks. So we'll start Crumb here in week 10. And then in week 11, I've got a couple readings on Crumb. We've got Blair Johnston's article analyzing Black Angels and these different kind of thematic elements in it. And then I've got Steve Brunn's. This is not about Black Angels, actually. This is about an earlier piece, but the idea is that Crumb does a lot of quotation and a lot of imitation of other music. And so Bruns analyzes that kind of in context. What does it mean when he quotes Mahler, and how does it change the way you hear the Mahler, and how does it change the way that you hear other music that he quotes because he puts it in this new context, and what does it mean in that context, and things like that. So that's that article. Then in week 12, we've got one more Crumb article to read about An Idol for the Misbegotten, which is a really cool flute piece. And Robert Cook unpacks all the different references in that piece as well, and the narrative threads happening in it, and how it's all basically a big comment on mankind's unacceptable treatment of the environment. So that will be a really interesting one to read as well. And then I will do what I call my Library of Congress show and tell video, because in the context of doing research for my book about Crumb, I went to the Library of Congress and did basically an archival research trip. They have all what they call his papers, the George Crumb papers is a collection of his sketches and letters and scrapbooks, and it's a huge collection of things. And I show you some photos from that in this show and tell video. So that will hopefully just be a couple weeks where you have to read a lot about Crumb, but then between the abstract video, my intro to Black Angels, and the Library of Congress show and tell video, hopefully that'll be a time when it's a little bit low stress, because those things are less complicated to digest than some of the articles. Then in week 13, I've got a couple articles from this Society for Music Theory's new journal that's called SMTV, and it's what they call a videocast journal. And this first one is about this guy who covered Abbey Road, and it's all in Japanese, but he rewrote lyrics to go with all the songs such that the Japanese words have the same vowel sounds at the same times that the English words would. So when you listen to it, it is bizarre. It sounds like Abbey Road, but it has different lyrics. So that should be a really interesting one. So those are videos, and it's a peer-reviewed video article is a way of thinking about it. It's an article. It has been thoroughly peer-reviewed. I know, because I know the process at that journal. but it's not something that you read. So that should be a little bit interesting and different. Same thing applies to Alyssa Barna's article, the dance chorus and recent top 40. So those are both relatively recent articles also, so I hope that the music in it is like, I mean, that's the Beatles, but I hope that the music in this one actually is recent top 40. So, she's interested in times when you have a verse and a chorus, and then there's a repetition of the chorus with no lyrics, and the expectation is that it's just for dancing. So she explains the form of that kind of song in this article. Once again, a video, so that should be interesting and different. In our last week of articles, we're going to read this article that was originally published online, but I have a PDF that I posted for it because it's not available online anymore, and I wanted to make sure I had it. So William O'Hara is a music theorist who wrote this interesting piece about Slate or Vox or other kind of popular news sites will post stuff that basically is music theory, but it's not going by that name. And so he's interested in times when the internet has this music theory content, and why do we do that? Why are people interested in that? And what does it sort of mean? So think pieces, basically. The idea of music theory think pieces being a thing on the internet. And a lot of them have to do with popular music as well. So that should be interesting, especially after we have read several pieces about popular music before our crumb time. And then the last thing I almost always assign as our final reading in this class, this chapter from Conventional Wisdom by Susan McClary. And I don't allow anybody to present on it because I like to be the one who presents it, and I sometimes will have Dr. Pippin, our resident ethnomusicologist at CSU, who's also my husband. I sometimes will have him join me and we'll kind of discuss it together, and you can watch a video about that instead of having one of you present it. So Conventional Wisdom is an amazing book that, in my opinion, I would like just every grad student to be required to read it, every grad student in music everywhere, not just here. I also think if you're like, I don't know what I would want to write about for this class, maybe check out that book, because some of it deals with tonal music, but I think there's also a lot of chapters that don't. And it's just a sort of conventional wisdom you might know is the idea that, some things we just sort of know because that's just the way that it is. That's a convention. And she, Susan McClary, the author, starts to ask, well, why is that the case? What do we take for granted, and why do we take it for granted? And what does that mean in the 20th century when there's so much change and upheaval, and tonality is, the significance of tonality changes over the course of the century. So I really love to close with that. And then we'll have your actual final presentations, and I will watch all of them. I will ask you to watch as many of them as you can and comment on them in Canvas. And at that point, you can just watch each other's final presentations and prepare for your final paper. And then during finals week, we don't have a final exam. We'll just have the final paper that will be due again by the Wednesday of finals week. And that's all I have on the syllabus. If you have any questions about the schedule or anything like that, definitely let me know. Then I have a Google Doc sign up where you can put your name where it says presenter and claim one of these articles. Please don't erase anyone else's name, but it's okay with me if you want to get in touch with each other and trade. That's fine. I don't mind you switching, even as the semester goes on, as long as everybody does one. And there are more slots than there are people. So feel free to sign up and just know that it's fine if one of them is left blank. I will cover whatever is left blank, and I'll present those days, which is totally fine. So try to pick something that will be interesting for you or that appeals to you. Keep in mind if your recital is, for example, March 8th, then you probably don't want to pick something in week 8. And if that becomes an issue, if you are like the last one to sign up and that's all that's left or something, let me know and we'll work it out. But keep in mind that I do expect you to present sometime in the semester, and having to travel for an audition or something like that is not an excuse to skip the assignment. So your classmates will be counting on you to do the presentation so that they have something very specific to comment on in the Canvas discussions as well. So things to think about, lots of stuff that you can consider. What is most appealing to you? Which of these things will you get the most out of? And if you have any questions about that, you can let me know. Or if you have questions about the syllabus. And please feel free to drop into office hours and just say hi, even if you don't have a question. I would like to just get to see your face and meet you. Or if you want to just schedule a time for us to meet, that's fine too. We can just chat. We can brainstorm my things that you might want to do for your final paper or whatever. So it's never too soon to start thinking about that. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you better, and I hope you have a wonderful semester this semester at CSU and in this class in particular. And I will be back with more video content later. So bye for now.